Really, at first, I didn't really believe that this was really something to worry about. But as I was doing some research, it seems to be there are actually quite a suite of tools people can use to kind of game the interview or cheat the interview.
I suspect the cheating tools like Cluely are a backlash against LeetCode, right? And
Mhm.
what people perceive to be unfair interviewing practices.
Have the person show us how they think. And if they can think through a problem and kind of explain their process for how they would implement it.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Code Cognition, where we're here to talk about a really, interesting, burgeoning topic, which is hiring and interviewing in the in the world of AI code assistants and special tools, which seem to be designed just to help you show up on meetings as an AI avatar. And we have two special guests with us today, and I'd like them to introduce themselves. Philip
Hey, I'm a lead developer here at Olio. I run a software team, and hiring is one of the things I do. So it's my world right now.
and Scott.
Hey, I'm Scott, the CEO of Olio Apps, and have been involved with many a hiring over time. And it's interesting to see the changes.
Definitely. No, I'm really interested to talk about this today. I've hired a lot of engineers myself back when I was in more of an operations role. And so, I didn't have to deal with the idea of like AI impersonation inside the interview, inside the technical interview and in this. And really, at first, I didn't really believe that this was really something to worry about. But as I was doing some research, it seems to be there are actually quite a suite of tools people can use to kind of game the interview or cheat the interview to the point to where I learned that there's like a meta stack. If you're a gamer, the idea of like the competitive meta of how to do something, and they're like the meta stack for the AI tools for your AI code interview, or is this tool and this tool, and if you're not using that, you're at a disadvantage. And that just blew my mind as a fellow gamer and nerd. It's like, wow, people are really spending a lot of time thinking about it. And that makes me think like maybe we should start a little bit in terms of like where are there like what were the failures or the shortcomings in like either the interviewing process before the realm of AI or how people have been taught to prepare for an interview that makes, maybe cheating with an AI code assistant appealing. That's where my mind first goes.
Early on in the time of Olio Apps, we first started by hiring interns who were coming out of code schools, a whole bunch of prospects, and the interview was kind of part of their internship, or it was kind of part of their code school process, like get the experience of having an actual technical interview. We would ask them to just do something simple first, like write a JavaScript function, or then do something and then level up from there. Like, okay, now write a function that given a string reverses it and move on from there. But now with AI tools, like at least in the if you know how to prompt an AI development tool, you don't need to know how to write a JavaScript function or need to know exactly how to write like a thing that can reverse a string. But we used that to kind of just have the person show us how they think. And if they can think through a problem and kind of explain their process for how they would implement it. So I don't know how that changes over time as people rely more on the AI tools. I think to some degree we have to expect that you're going to use AI tools, and if you can get the job done using AI tools, that's fine. But what are we interviewing for? We're interviewing for can this person think through a problem?
I suspect the cheating tools like Cluely are a backlash against LeetCode, right? And
Mhm.
what people perceive to be unfair interviewing practices.
Yeah, that's on the other extreme of what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, no, I'm gonna bring that up because this is, I think, why we got to where we are today. So, like, I have been LeetCode interviewed, right? and it feels like you're being tricked, right, or set up to fail. And they say no Google, no Stack Overflow, you can't use AI. And then they ask you esoteric questions, right, that no one in their right mind would sit around memorizing, and it's certainly not going to be your day-to-day job. And yet that's what the interview is. So I think developers started to see that and think, well, this is silly, so I'm going to respond in kind, right? I'm going to make a tool that will solve my problem of these weird interviews, right? Um, so it's kind of a natural evolution where we're just people are reacting to the interviews of the day.
No, definitely. I think you both kind of like gave this end of the spectrum, and part of the interview is so much about like getting to know one another, like getting to know who is this person, and like, are we going to work well? Like, because ideally, if you're hiring someone, it's like a multiple year commitment in the ideal sense of the word. So when there is a level of, I don't know, dishonesty or disingenuousness that's started off, it's kind of sours the relationship. So I can understand that aspect. But to your point, Philip, I can 1 billion% relate or agree. Like understanding these AI code assistants and sort of cheating tools as a backlash against this LeetCode uh, forward kind of way people are getting interviewed. I think that makes sense. I even have a friend and colleague who, they kind of pivoted their role and went back into engineering, and they had a real hard time getting a position because they had to go through this leak code process. And this was someone who, had worked in enterprise teams before and has like a lot of real experience. And not just, oh, can you do the technical aspect, but how do you navigate the interpersonal relationships when a project deadline isn't, going to be met, and navigating those real tough decisions, which you would want someone to be able to do. But all that's really like thrown out of the way because they didn't pass their leak code test, which is very disheartening.
Yeah, doing the job and interviewing for the job, almost two different skills.
So I'm of the opinion that an interview should be as close to the real job as possible.
Yes.
That's why I'm a fan of take-home programming challenges. Because in real life, your manager's not going to be staring over your shoulder, looking at your keyboard while you frantically try to remember, something you would normally just look up Google, right? It's very high stress environment, but programming in reality is you're just in front of your computer, kind of relaxing, thinking hard about the problem. And like the last person I hired at Olio, we give them a take-home test. We actually paid them for it, a couple hours of pay, and they came back and talked about it. Right? Here's what I did. Here's why I did it. And we chatted together as if it was a real project. And that's how we ended up hiring that person.
No, I mean, I think I personally love the thought of that so much. It's like, why try to abstract the experience someone is going to have if you're actually trying to hire them for the company and for the job at hand. Um, like an interview, ideally in my mind, and how I always ran them was, how can I create the best approximate scenario of what I'm going to be expecting them to do in this world where I can't just immediately put them in and trial them out for whatever sort of reason. And that worked out very, very well. So this whole world of leak code interviews and this, it's hard for me not to fully sympathize with like wanting to flip the table a little bit or just really opt out of those positions at all. But it seems to be that there is a lion's share of, I don't know, big tech companies that have adopted this paradigm of this interview style, which prioritizes these challenges. Which which begs the question a little bit of, these AI tools aren't going away. And like, how much, like, to what point do you think these AI tools are, it's just like Stack Overflow, or it's just Google search, but faster. And versus, oh no, this person is cheating. This person is being disingenuous and I can't trust them to be on my team. Like, is there a line that you're thinking of right now in that span?
I kind of wonder if at some point you're not hurting yourself if you're going to spend so much effort and time and money cheating. And by the way, like think how much practice it takes to be able to read off a teleprompter in the middle of an interview and not give it away.
Yeah, not look like you're doing it.
Like you can watch newscasters, you see their eyes moving, right? Like
Mhm.
it's how would you get away with that? If you're going to put that much effort into it, you might as well get put that much effort into being good at your job, right? For real. Uh, so I wonder if this is a real problem or not, right? It could be blown out of proportion.
Yeah, maybe it's just kind of like a momentary buzz thing, but I think like the homework assignment, they're going to be able to bring all the tools
Yeah,
they have to bear on the problem,
yeah.
and I would want them to.
I had this exact experience going from high school to college, right? My high school final exam, right? Everyone said books away, under the desk, calculators away, everything gone, and then you just do it like this. I went to college, and the professor's like, yeah, whatever, use whatever book you want, calculator, it doesn't matter, because like it was like proving theorems. Like you're not gonna, the calculator's not gonna do that for you. It was all about thinking. Totally different sort of testing in college, and I think that's far more realistic to how it is in the real world with interviewing.
I think that's a great corollary. I mean, I think the more that we can think of like these AI tools as tools rather than like full on replacements for people, I think that's just like generally a more sustainable way of approaching this. You know, we've always continually invented a newer, faster, like more streamlined way of doing anything. You know, before we were planting crops by hand and we created the plow and it's like wow look agricultural revolution and like what is this going to do to the people who just put the seeds in the ground. It's like, well, now they can do more seeds in this way. So it's in certain ways, it's the more things change, the more they stay the same. It's just maybe the look of it is a little bit different. And Scott, you mentioned a little bit about wanting someone to really use all the tools that they have at their disposal. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about that, and if there is like really a line between augmentation versus misrepresentation in your mind with these tools, or it's like no, we're creative people, we can use the tools that we can. I want them to solve problems in a novel way.
If they're doing something, if you ask them to solve a problem that is like a real world work problem, it's not going to be like, can you walk a binary tree or like do a LeetCode challenge? It's going to be like, can you implement this feature in this app? And in that case, you're probably going to use Google and Stack Overflow and ChatGPT to help you. And so why not just be fine with that? And then in that case, I don't think they would feel the need to use a tool like Cluely where they need to like look like they know look like they know exactly how to, solve the leak code problem or like the esoteric, search algorithm. Because that's probably not, at least here, that's not what we're doing.
I feel like, are you hiring someone to compete on Jeopardy? Then have a closed book test, lock them in a room, right? See what they've memorized. But if you're hiring someone to just do a job, certainly a remote job, then yeah, any tool at their disposal. So Aaron Schwartz was a famous programmer, and he had a very famous blog. Um, and down here, look, November 29th, 2009. So this is 17 years ago. And this is how he hires programmers. And I think it's relevant today. Uh, so number one, do they know stuff? Right. Number two, are they curious? Number three, do they learn? Right? Especially in programming, things change all the time. And number four, finally, can you work with them? Right. And he talks about his interview style is I can work with someone, I hang out with them, right? Have a conversation with them, right? Right. How do I tell someone smart? Have a conversation with them. So these human parts of interviewing haven't, and I think won't go away. Again, that's from 2009.
I think one of Arn's points that's not on there that I like is how do they how do they handle stress? And so when we ask them like technical questions, we usually, we ramp it up, not expecting them necessarily to know the answer, but to see how they how they respond under stress.
Or very similar to that, what do you do or how do they respond when they don't know something?
Hmm.
Because that's like half of programming is you don't know something. You have to look it up and learn it.
Yeah. Do you have an algorithm for figuring it out, or how would you go about solving this problem that you don't understand?
I like to think that, if someone was listening to this right now and, they're very like anxious and stressed out about the interviewing process they have to go on, like this would be a little bit healing for them to think they're like, oh my gosh, wow, people in the job, the people in the industry, this is like the real human perspective of your peers if you're going to be working with, rather than like you just have to savantly know the answer to any question that is ever presented to you, and that we're all people who know the answers to every technical problem, which is just like not the case. And especially in a very technical field in the world of software, sometimes we're having problems that haven't really happened before. Like, oh, this service hasn't had this kind of thought put through this other required API, and we need to figure out a way to marry these 2 points together. Like that's kind of cool to be. There's no leak code question that's going to template that out for you. We need to be evaluating for something else in the interview process that gets to that. How does this person handle this critical place of unknown?
Well, let me play devil's advocate for a second, just talk about the other side of things.
Mhm.
Um, so, for example, Google famously popularized lead coding, and Google's a very successful company with very smart engineers. So maybe it does work. Um, and there are times, so in high school, I learned my times tables, I memorized them. In college, I memorized the periodic table of all the elements for chemistry. Why? Because you can't do chemistry if you have to stop and look up every element that you're working with, right? And so if you give someone hard leet code problems and they really can do it, it's hard to fake that. Like it's hard to be really good at leet code and then terrible at programming, right? Like
Mhm.
there is a little bit of overlap between the two. Um, so the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, right? I feel like interviews can't only be leet code, but also there has to be some test of your programming ability in an interview. Right? So again, I favor the take-home test. Yeah, there's something to it a little bit, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I feel like memorizing your times tables and knowing the periodic table, or being able to have some memory recall of concepts, is going to help you do tasks faster. So, and interviewing is a skill. It's a little bit different than like being in the job, and it's imperfect. It's like, how much can you actually learn about this person in 30 minutes or an hour? It's a really low resolution, blurry picture versus like if you spent, longer with them. That's why doing multiple things like a take home challenge, maybe a couple of leak codish kind of questions, and then other kinds of questions. And if I was talking to somebody who is interviewing right now, I would just say to practice it, because interviewing is a skill in itself. Yeah, it can't hurt you to like do some leak code practice, watch some YouTube videos of other people doing that, just to have a little bit of that skill under your belt.
I think it would be interesting to talk about the other side of interviewing right now. Because I'm going to tell you a secret. You, who is interviewing tomorrow, I'm going to tell you a secret. The person interviewing you wants you to succeed. There's nothing better than hiring a good employee. And there's nothing worse than interviewing someone and then not hiring them. And so, from our end, as the interviewers, right, I do want you to succeed. And let me open it up to Josh and Scott. Are there things that you do to help the interviewee, right, feel comfortable, to bring out the best in them, to not let nerves overwhelm their ability to reason and, flub the interview?
Yeah, well, sometimes we say like, "Hey, you might be interviewing multiple times. Just consider this practice." And we even have offered to do practice interviews for people who are either rusty or haven't done it in a while, or they're new to the industry. We tell them we don't expect you to know all the answers.
I know I would always ask, and now I'm remembering. I created like like a list of like 7 must-have questions that I would train everyone who would then go on to interview, like, oh, we should try to cover these. And the one that's coming to my mind off this to make someone feel like really comfortable and empowered in the interview process was always asking them, really like being genuine, like, why do you want to like work for us, or like why this company, why now, and how do you see this fitting into like your career goals and your personal goals, and trying to really get them to light up and feel comfortable to be like, this is why I want to do this as genuinely as possible. Because for me, I knew as like hiring manager and also understanding where they fit in the team structure, I could then like kind of fit them as a puzzle piece. Like, oh, this person is really wanting to specialize in this skill set, or they're looking uh, to grow with working with certain individuals. That would be that would just useful information to know for me to know like how to balance their level of like technical skill as well as kind of the soft skill team dynamics, and to see if they were really into it. Because it is a little bit cliche, but we do want people who want to work for the company or have an alignment of vision in some way. I think that you want to work with people who are excited to be there, number one. So if you can be genuinely excited, sometimes that's pretty rare and like a big competitive advantage.
Yeah, if you can come across human and excited about it, like, then you're gonna seem more fun to work with, and that's desirable.
I always take the first 5 minutes to just talk, not about work. Just hello, what are you up to today? What did you do this weekend? Right. Get to know the person before anything um, stressful can come up, right? About like interview questions. And then I also like to kind of lead the witness with an example of what I mean, right? So I might ask and answer my own question first, right? So I can say, hey, I'm going to ask you some questions about technology. For example, I might ask you, how would you pick a database for a new project? Would it be document storage or would it be relational? Do you need to do joins or things like that? And I would answer my own question, and they would kind of know, oh, this is the kind of interview it's going to be. Philip's going to ask me, how would I think through it? What kind of understanding do I have? It's not going to be, what's the syntax for a generator function in JavaScript, right? Like, it's like, oh my gosh, right? And that kind of puts them at ease knowing what questions. It's not a curveball right out of left field that I'm going to suddenly ask them. Years ago, at some point, I did an interview, and let's pretend the interview was tomorrow. So we're recording this on Wednesday. I have an interview on Thursday. So I sent an email like, hey, I'm excited to interview tomorrow. Just checking, is it a LeetCode interview? Because if so, I want to do some practice tonight, so I'm ready for it. They said, oh, no, 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 it's not LeetCode. It's fine. It's just a very casual conversation. Great. I showed up on Thursday. It was LeetCode, and I wasn't ready, and I failed the interview. And I was so mad at them. And I don't know why you would purposefully trick someone like
Maybe you gave them the idea and they we're gonna do a casual interview, but they're like, "Hey, that's kind of a good idea. We should leak code him."
that.
He's asking for it. He wants to show off his skills.
I guess so, yeah.
The trap trick, I think, is the bait and switch of the interview process. I think I'm not personally aligned with that.
Yeah, that's not cool.
I feel afflicted for past Philip, even if current Philip maybe he's gotten over it. Now I have to get over it now in that way. You did remind me though that I also would do a similar process where kind of like tee up the structure of the question for them before I asked it. Because a critical thing I always wanted to hear someone talk about was how they had experimented with this novel technology stack or this technology stack, the problem that they encountered trying to implement it in like their production workload, and how they troubleshooted that instance. How did they get around solving it? Or if they didn't solve it, why wasn't it solved? Because we can't solve all problems. And I would kind of walk them through that, and then I would just ask them to tell me what it is. And there's like two buckets of individuals. There was those individuals who could only literally just mirror the structure that I gave them in my language, which was like, huh, I was hoping for a little bit more. But those who could use that as a jumping off point for sort of a larger discussion about the problem at hand and really get to shine their level of expertise, that was always like, whoa, I really want to work with this person who kind of can like take the space to guide me on a little learning journey and some appropriate self promotion of what they're able to do. So being able to recognize when you're being able to give someone a time to shine in the interview process, I think is also important for the interviewer because it allows you to get the most that you possibly can out of this 30 to 60 minutes, like you're saying.
I try to I try to keep interviews mostly positive. So I had a weird interview experience once where it was a very negative interview. Every question was like, "What's the worst mistake you ever made? What happens when the production database gets dropped? What happens when you have to fire people?" Right? And I was like, "Oh my God!" Right? Like, and by the end of the interview, I was just like depressed. Just talking through it. Uh, and it's important, right? Like, how do you act under stress and things like that are important. But it's better, like what you just said, Josh. Let them shine. Like, what problem did you solve in a clever way? Right? Um, what challenge did you overcome? Right? Those are, I think, funner questions for the person to answer, and it shows off what they can do.
Hope that wasn't our interview, Philip.
Not at all. Here I am.
Now, I certainly have a couple points, blowing around in my mind a bit. Um, One thing that I do want to talk about at one point is, recently I went back to my alma mater. They do like a little entrepreneurship competition thing, and I wasn't one of the mentors for the program, which I had done, but I was kind of the ask me anything individual of like, what is it like to be someone who gets a job and has a career outside college? And it's like, yes, yes, I can provide some insight. And I had a lot of questions of college students about to graduate, maybe sophomores, they're studying computer science, and they're being fed a little bit of a notion of like, oh no, AI is going to take all of the software engineering jobs. And they wanted to get a gut check from me about like, well, how real is that kind of thing? And I kind of wanted to pose the question, maybe not directly that question, but if you were a candidate today, or what kind of advice maybe is good to give a candidate today that is trying to get a software engineering role? But I think we should talk. I'm interested to hear not just like the entry level role, but also like the mid level engineer, someone who's been in it for a little bit, but they're looking for a new position. What's like a strategic or helpful way to be thinking about how to be building themselves up in this age of AI?
I'm going to quote Ian, one of our coworkers. Ian said, "I always viewed software or programming, right, as solving problems. And I'll tell you what, there's no shortage of problems in the world. And if you look at the history of programming, I think it's fascinating. Um, with AI, typing code into a text editor, right, has been a problem until now. Right? It might be that the actual physical act of typing with autocomplete, right, with AI, maybe that's not a problem anymore, right? But that doesn't mean there's no problems. Everyone needs better software. We all complain about software all the time, right? And how we wish software could do this and that. And tech companies are the biggest companies in the world, right? So I don't think solving problems is going anywhere, but typing code might go somewhere.
Problems are not going anywhere. Problems seem to be blooming and multiplying. This and is even in like in our projects right now, as we build stuff, I don't know, just more stuff comes up and problems to solve that I can't just like throw AI at. Not today, but AI can help me do some of the rote tasks, and it can help me with prototyping. But right now, AI can't just completely build the full app soup to nuts, and it doesn't need me.
So would you say like being able to demonstrate a problem solving mindset on top of your technical skill set is like an advantageous thing to be working towards?
Yes. So I had a thought, uh, thinking about this podcast ahead of time, right? What is the future of interviewing? How do you hire a graphic designer, right? You look at their portfolio. How do you hire a chef? You eat their food, right? So in the future, how do you hire a programmer? I think it's going to be important for programmers to have portfolios of apps that they've done. Now, GitHub is kind of an early iteration of this, right? You can have open source repositories and things. But especially in the world of AI, it's going to be possible for one developer to build real apps, right? Show them off. Why did you build this? What problem did you solve, right? In addition to, of course, this is what I did at my last job and my last job, things like that. but a kind of a portfolio mindset.
I do like that a lot. I do definitely like that a lot because I think there's a skill of being able to be someone who's able to create a portfolio of work and to understand a variety of actual solvable problems, and then to be able to articulate to other individuals. That really hits I think quite a lot of bars in my realm, to the point to where I would feel comfortable putting that individual or engineer in a situation where they would have to like describe requirements, not just for their own team, but maybe another team that has no idea what they're working on, and be able to advocate for why we need to be making this choice instead of that choice. And so I definitely like that. That being said, I can say that I have brought candidates to the table before, to where most of their experience was just a portfolio, so to speak, without a lot of like battle tested experience. There's certain experience that can only happen at a project at a certain scale. And if that's what you're hiring for, the portfolio doesn't quite cut it.
What one advice I'd give to people who want to make a career out of programming is figure out what you enjoy. So it's a huge field, right? And the three of us are specifically speaking from Olio Apps, and we build apps and websites for our clients. But that's just a tiny part, right? If you want, you can work at very low levels on assembly language in game engines running 120 frames per second, right? Or you can do AI research, right? Or you can do graphic design, right? Like, so figure out what you enjoy. And then, like when I say portfolio, right, it's a umbrella term, whatever the portfolio is for a compiler engineer, right? Like you put that together for yourself.
Yeah, open source projects, actual real running apps that users can poke around with. And also, thanks to the AI tools, I feel like it's never been easier to kind of like get up and started from like not even really knowing how to code. I've seen multiple stories of this recently, where people who've kind of transitioned into software development recently from other industries because they had an app idea or some problem that they wanted to solve, and they started using AI tools like ChatGPT or Claude, and now they're building. Now they do have like a whole portfolio of tools.
That's very, very impressive. Um, Along the lines of the interview itself and the structure of the interview, I'm interested in both your takes. Is that whenever someone is like prepping for an interview, there's always like this piece of advice that's given that I've seen, which is like, oh, make sure you're asking the interviewer a really good question. Really think about the kinds of questions you should be asking the person interviewing you. And so I want to kind of like split that and ask: is there a question that you always hope a candidate asks you and doesn't? Or is there a question that you think an interviewer should always ask the interviewee?
Well, there's levels to this, and I think we've all gone through this. The first level is deer in headlights. I have no questions, right? And then then you feel silly after the interview, right? The second level is you spend all weekend thinking of the perfect question. You write it down, and it's like this 3 paragraph question. You ask the interviewer, and they're like, "What? What is it? I don't care." Right? Like, then the third level of this is the real answer to your question, which is interviews are two ways. So not only do they want to hire a good employee, but you want to work somewhere that you want to work. And so the real question you should ask is what you care about. So I'll give a specific example here at Olio, right? So uh, my last job, I was at a very large company with thousands of employees. And I think a lot of people have had this experience where they didn't feel like anything they did mattered, right? If you're one person out of 2,000, whatever, right? And at Olio, we're about 20 people. Everything everybody does matters a lot. And that was a question I asked during my interview, right? Is like, what is that like, right? Working here, how much agency do we have, right? Um, that's the kind of place I was looking for. So it mattered to me in the interview. And I assume Olio probably appreciated that question, right? More than some very clever question that I could have thought up over the weekend or whatever, right? So I think that's the real answer to your question.
Certainly a gold star for me, Philip. Thank you. That was quite good. Scott, I'm interested to hear your perspective.
Yeah, no, I liked that question because, like, yeah, it's a small company. You can affect a lot of change, or you can kind of like write your own story in a smaller company. That's kind of why I like starting my own company, and you can have more agency. And yeah, you're not just one cog in like a 2,000 person company. Yeah, any kind of like questions about like what it is like to work there, if you indicate that you've read their blog or you've looked them up online and you know something about the company and what they do and can ask a poignant question about that. I think that's helpful.
Yeah, that's a good point. Somewhere between nothing and like a long cover letter, right? Again, from personal experience, I think I've had the most success in interviews where I at least knew something about the company and who their competitor was, for example, right?
Yeah.
Because then I'm able to say things that sound intelligent, and that's always good in an interview.
Yeah. And if you seem like you are excited to work for this company specifically because of like a reason, then that's a standout thing.
No, that's a very, very important point. I think certainly at the, for smaller companies or for companies where every individual can have quite a large impact. And sometimes, 1,000 person, multi-thousand person companies, it is that. Maybe you're interviewing for a director role or some senior director role, and you're going to have a large impact. Uh, Being able to have an idea of that going in is, I think, really, really huge. And if you really have no idea of like, the role and the impact your role could have, maybe making that a focus of the interview to pull out some of that information could be like quite a beneficial thing for you to be working towards. And if you have no idea, even like asking that as part of the interview question, I think that is I think that's good. I think that's good, a good baseline to be setting alignment between the interviewer and interviewee. Wow, this person cares about their impact in the business and our lives working together.
And in reverse, right? So as the interviewer, right, at some place like Olio, right, a question I like to ask is what trade-offs have you made? It's such a small company, right? You can't do everything. You have to pick and choose your battles. You have to try to work on high impact things, right? Um, so why, right? And contrast that to again like a 2,000 person company. Why did you do that? It was the next ticket on the Jira board. That's why I did it, right? Which was fine in that situation, right? But in this situation, I want to know like that you have agency and you made these decisions yourself for reasons, right, that you can explain, um, and that kind of aligns with our culture.
But what if you're interviewing for like a manager or something they're grooming the Jira board? I
Well, exactly. So yeah, always adapt, right?
like to ask why as well.
And that certainly like unveils the context a bit more if it's the manager versus just the person who's in charge of executing the tickets.
I was going to say one specific piece of advice that works for me: stalk them on LinkedIn, right? If you know the person you're going to be interviewing, at least find one thing that have in common with them, so that if there's an awkward pause, you can like, oh, you play golf too, right? Like just something to help you get to know the person.
I think what is it? Some of the most successful, I think, interviews I've ever had and or conversations also kind of also stemmed from being able to relate at that level. Philip, I can certainly agree with. I think one of the best conversations I had was figuring out that it was like me and their wife had gone to the same high school, and it was just like, oh wow, a fellow dragon. Who would have thought? And it was like, wow, the whole flavor of the conversation completely changed. So it's that human to human connection is invaluable in terms of being able to try to get that in the interview process while being genuine at the same time.
This might be a segue into somewhat of a controversial part of interviewing, which is culture. Right? You can pass or fail a LeetCode question, and they can fairly move you to the next stage or reject you based on that. But I know from experience that it sucks to get an email or the HR person calls you up and they say, you're just not a culture fit. and then you have to put your tail between your legs, walk home, and think, what does that mean, right? So how do you screen for culture? Maybe the hardest thing.
Well, I liked Aaron Schwartz's post where you just hang out with them for a bit. Um, I like how you said you like the first 5 minutes to just talk. Um, that's like the virtual Zoom version of hanging out, at least for 5 minutes. But and then maybe leave it open, leave some open end at the end as well to just kind of hang out and talk a little bit more.
I think part of how I answer this, I touched a little bit on in terms of the like being able to like mirroring the question and the question answer structure of like overcoming a challenge. Like all the questions that I would ask in an interview sort of mirror a kind of like avatar of a certain individual of how they are interested in solving problems, the way I'm phrasing certain points like oh, what makes you want to join this small international startup that's happening, like being able to leave some breadcrumbs so I can gauge in the conversation where they're like, uh no, I really want a really normal stable job versus like, wow, I like that this is kind of wild or on the cutting edge, and it's growing and I'm part of something new. So being able to sort of hint at what I'm looking for within the line of questions. So that's one thing that I would do. And then number two, which I think was pretty innovative for what we had done before, was we had been very public about our image and just like who we were in the marketplace. And so the people who are interested in working for us kind of already bought into this idea of who we were. And thankfully it was actually what we wanted. It wasn't like a huge cultural mismatch, but we kind of created like a culture and brand around us. And so thankfully we were able to get those kinds of people that wanted to work with us. So you can do it outside the interview process, I think is my suggestion. And then one thing I wanted to make sure that we got to that I'm really interested in chatting about, because in this, I think in the whole set of conversations that we get to have about Gen AI and what our world looks like in this post AI world, it's maybe oh gosh, how do we fight this? How do we combat this? This whole conversation could have taken like a very different turn. But instead, um, I think this question aligns with uh, where we did take the conversation, which is like, how does the design of the interview process change? How do we adapt, understanding that these tools exist and people are using them, and it's probably in all of our best interests to learn how to work with the modern tools? Um, what needs to change and what maybe needs to adapt? Any thoughts, or has the structure we've discussed today probably at least good enough for now? Scott, would you like to take a crack first?
I will take a crack. So real world problems. Ideally, it would be something similar to something that you or someone on your team is actually wrestled with in the last couple weeks, so you have it fresh. Um, I like having the interviewee screen share and just kind of like show what they're doing. Tell them they can use Google or whatever tools they want to solve the problem, and give them a chance to do it. We call that like a live coding challenge, where we ask them to just like share their screen and just live code along, and just talk about it with us, and we're kind of pair with them like we would do if we were like just having a Zoom call normally and kind of trying to figure out a tough problem together at work.
I'm trying to think of the long term of your question. It's really hard predicting the future, right? But if you look at the past, technological innovations, once Pandora's box has been opened, I can't really think of any times in history where it's been put back in the box, right? Where people said, no, the Industrial Revolution, that was a bad idea. We're getting rid of it, right? And so you don't have to love AI exactly, but if you think that it's going to go away and go back in the box, I just don't see that as realistic. So I think everyone's going to have to adapt, right? Um, the interviewers and the interviewees, and just the job, right? Like, I'm going to give an optimistic take, right? I don't think human creativity is going to get less, right? Or worse, or fewer, or unimportant. Like, if you look at other technological advances, like the MP3, right? Now there's more music than ever, right? It's controversial, right? There's issues with paying artists and things like that, but there's more music than ever. Right? There's more video than ever. I think with AI, there's going to be more code than ever, and that's going to be more jobs than ever.
You were talking the other day, Philip, about like code as content, where it's just going to be like more and more. So much YouTube is uploaded every single day. There's going to be like more and more apps.
Yeah, and don't focus on the negatives that come out of it. Like, nobody cares that there's 10 million hours of bad video on YouTube. Okay, don't watch it, right? Watch the good stuff, right? And that's what people do every day. And so, um, or like books, right? Like with Kindle and self-publishing on Amazon, there's more writers than ever before, and that's great. It democratizes the playing field, right? It allows anybody to write, anybody can make videos, anyone can make apps now, right? It used to be you spent years in school learning a craft, and now anyone in the world can build an app. Have a good idea, build an app, sell it, get rich. That's the dream, right? So my optimistic take is I prefer to focus on the good things rather than the bad things. Nothing's ever perfect, right? There's always downsides, but I don't think it's going back in the box, and I think we should try to make uh, the best of it.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you so much. No, any closing points? Otherwise, Philip, thank you so much for joining us today. Scott, thank you so much for joining us. I think this was a really good conversation on the state of interviewing in this world of AI, and hard to uh, hard to top the observation that I don't know if they've ever been able to put it back in the box, so to speak.
I think what I want to end on is interviewing is hard, and you just have to do your best. It's a skill like any other practice, right? That's what we all do. I don't see that changing.
Yep. Practice, practice, practice.
Completely.
All right. Thanks, Josh, for hosting.
You're very welcome. Happy to do so. And until next time.